Well, if you have enabled the multi-vendor plugin, like how I showed in the last video, you might be at the point where you're wondering, how do I actually use this now? And this is what I want to show in this video. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the steps of enabling it in the code and then also syncing it with the front end, the Remix default front end. And then I'm going to show you how to actually call it and make sure that at least some portion of it's working and get you on the right track. So the very first thing that we should have already done in the last video is we enabled the multi-vendor plugin, and then we tested it, and that was working fine from the Postman, and we registered new seller. But now what we want to do is we want to jump over to the front end. Well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start the back end, and then I'm going to jump over to the front end, and we're going to start making changes over there. Now the front end, what you'll notice is if you go into the package.json file, you're going to see a script that says generate, and it's going to run GraphQL codegen with a config file of codegen.yaml. This is going to use codegen.yaml, which is already in our directory, as a configuration to generate new GraphQL schema files, which end up inside this generated folder here. So you can see here in this generated folder, we have graphql.ts and we have schema.graphql, and these are generated based off of the schema that it finds on port 3001. So the first thing we want to do is make some changes inside codegen.yaml. We could see here that the schema is going to be reading from our Vendure API URL if it indeed reads from our environment variable, which has been set. So you can see we're reading from localhost 3001, but for some reason, sometimes this doesn't work out very as nicely as that. So let's just run a quick test here. I haven't ran this yet, so I'm thinking this will be okay, but we're going to run a quick test to show you what could go wrong. And we can see here that it generated outputs just fine. So there's no issues there. But now let's run another test here, and let's actually remove this secondary. Let's remove that. Let's remove this. And I believe I can just do this. I'm sure it's just that I don't know the correct syntax, but for some reason, if I remove, I've tried this variation, I've tried multiple variations to just access this variable, and the schema generation fails. So I'm not going to mess around with that too much. I'm sure I'm just doing something wrong. I don't know the syntax. But let's just plug in the actual API or the actual endpoint there. Once that is done generating, you'll notice that we have a few new things inside of our generated files. So if you go into inside this directory here, into graphql.ts, we search for like registerNewSeller or newSeller. You'll see we have a few new things that got generated here, but we don't have everything. We don't have the full picture. So in this next part, we're going to circle back to this, but in the next part, what we're going to do is we're going to go into our providers folder. We're going to go, you see we have account, checkout. We have all these things that act as providers. And at the bottom, we see we have definitions for mutations. And we want to do something similar for our seller. So let's create a new folder here. And then we're going to create a new file called seller.ts. And these have to be named the same. They have to be named the same as the folder, as the parent folder. Otherwise, you'll run into an error. I'm just going to copy one of these just for a little starting point, and then we're going to modify it. All right, this should be a good starting point here. So for now, what we're going to do is we're just going to add our new GraphQL tags here. Oops. We're going to define our mutation, register new seller, then we're going to import GraphQL. And we have this register customer account that I just grabbed from the account.ts. We're not going to use much of this, but we just get this structure of returning an SDK dot function call, things like that. Okay, let's actually get rid of most of this, and we're just going to keep things simple. Let's rename this to register seller account, query options, that's fine. Variables we want to, so let's import query options. We're going to keep this GraphQL wrapper, and then we want to change this to the mutation args that were imported from our generate GraphQL. So let's see if we can pick those up. New seller, mutation, register, new seller args. Just for simplicity here, I just want to get rid of the return type. Update import. Okay, we import SDK, register seller account, and we'll pass in variables and options. Exist. Okay, let's create this. All right, my OBS studio keeps crashing, but let's see if we can get through this. Let's see if we can run yarn generate. Okay, that seemed to have generated successfully. So let's see inside of our generated file. We have register new seller document that got generated correctly. And register new seller, this is the function that we're going to, we should be connecting to. Should be here, register new seller. That way we're calling that. Okay, I think that's it. So we've basically synced with our API. We've made a few changes. We first generated just to show what would happen. Then we came back into our seller provider and we defined this new GraphQL mutation here. And that got picked up by our code gen through the documents parameter here. And that generated the correct schema based off of what we're trying to grab from the mutation. And it's synced with the necessary functions and all that and made it available through this SDK value there from our GraphQL wrapper. So now we can simply call SDK.registerSeller, and on our front end we can actually should just be able to call this register seller account. So let's see if we can actually call something from the front end to actually register a new seller. So I'm going to go ahead and start this up. So on the front end side, launch the front end here. I think what we're going to do that might be the most somewhat practical, somewhat informative version of this is to go to our route section, and we're going to go under sign up, the sign up form here. And when we're signing up for an account, I think what could be cool is if we sign up for both the seller and the customer account at the same time. That way it uses the same login information to access both. And so I think what we could do is inside this action here is based off of when the form is submitted. We go into sign in and we say we want to sign up instead. We have email, first name, last name, password. So let's go here. We want to get it from variables, not from body. So let's go down here. Do this. Variables. Oh, variables is register customer input. Register input. There we go. Okay, so that will register the customer account. And at the same time, we want to register the seller's account. So let's do this here. Account, and we'll try catch this. And let's see if I can just log this here. So we have to create this input. So let's do constant seller account input, and this will be of type register seller input. Register seller and a shop name is what we need. So for seller, we just have to plug in all of the information. Okay, that seems to look pretty good. The last thing we need is the shop name. want to try something because the shop name we discovered in a previous video that it should be unique. The easier solution would be to create a hash and use this user input to generate a little ID, and then the user can go in and modify it through the admin UI. And I'm not sure what happens if they modify it to something that already exists, if there's already error checking in that case or not. But we could push it off to be the backend's problem. Let's see if we can use TypeScript. Okay, it wants to use crypto. Hopefully this will work. If not, I think it's interesting to share this anyways. So let's just do first name, and I'm just going to append the ID here to generate unique ID, and we'll pass just the first name. Actually, we'll do the last name. Probably be more unique. You could also append the first name and last name and pass it as one of the parameters. Okay, comma there. Looks good. I think that's all we need. Let's just call this here. Call register seller account, and we're just going to pass in seller account input, and we also have to pass in the request. Okay. Register seller args. Oh, input. Okay, input. All right, that should call that. Now, I don't recommend, I'll run this here. I don't recommend doing it this way just because what you could find is that since you're registering the seller account and then you're registering a customer account, it's possible that one of them fails and the other one succeeds. To alleviate that, I would maybe recommend like just return something here so that it doesn't process any further or something like that. That's probably actually the best way is if one of them fails, they both fail. Anyways, just a little caveat there. Let's open up the front end. All right, so to show that this is working, if it works, I just open up the admin on 3001. And I just tried logging in as John with test as the password, and that user doesn't exist. So let's try to create them here. Got the console opening. So first name John, last name will be John, password will be test, beat the password, and the email will be john@john.com, and we'll sign up there. Okay, looks like verification email has been sent. Let's see if we can log in without verifying. Provided credentials are invalid. Okay, so maybe we have to verify. And let's just, oh no, we have require verification is false. Okay, so that's fine then. So we should be able to log in. Okay, I finally figured out what the issue was. It turns out that ChatGPT kind of did me wrong. In some sense, I should have done more testing on the function that was being used. But in any case, something weird was going on with that hash function. I didn't even see what it was generating. I just tried it without it, and it seemed to work. So I think it was the crypto library that I was using. Probably wasn't returning something correctly. In any case, I replaced the hash function with this. It's a very bare bones type of hash. And this is still being called here to generate the store. And that's the only thing I changed. So here I'm going to show you that we don't have an account. Com test invalid. So let's create this. Okay, we don't have verification enabled, so we should be good to go. Log in, and there we go. So that's it for this video. I hope you learned something. Next video I'll try to put out will most likely be on enabling email notifications, things like that, mess around with the email. So yeah, look forward to that. I'll see you in the next one.